Just talking musicals, musicals with you.
Hello, I'm Lesley Anne Knight and welcome to the Just Talking Musicals meetup, where I get to have a quick catch up with some of today's outstanding theatre professionals from the West End and Broadway. I first met today's guest on a research trip to New York in 2014, and my goodness, what a lucky researcher I was. He's a regular presenter on Broadway radio and is the former New York-based theatre critic for the Newark Star Ledger newspaper in New Jersey and New Jersey's television station News 12. With 2 weekly columns at Masterworks Broadway and Critzland, he also writes regular entries for the Music Theatre International marquee blog. Add to this list multiple books on theatre and regular contributions to the websites theatremania.com and Broadway Online. And as if all that isn't enough, today's guest has acted as host and head of the selection committee for the Theatre World Awards since 1996, and prior to that served 4 terms as president and chairman of the nominating committee of the Drama Desk. He's served on an assessment panel for the National Endowment for the Arts and is the musical theatre judge for the ASCAP Awards programme. A massive welcome to today's Just Talking Musicals meetup guest, Mr. Peter Filichia.
Hi.
Hello, Peter. Phew, I was worried I wasn't going to get through that very impressive list of achievements throughout your career.
We've all done the best we can. What can we say?
Well, welcome to the meetup and the 7 questions that I love to ask everybody. I've got one in particular, though, that I've always meant to ask you since we first met up, is that one of the things I always see when you look at your Wikipedia entry is that it says, there's something on Wikipedia that says since 2017, that you have, over the course of your career, seen, is it really 11,000 shows?
Well, if the lockdown hadn't taken place on March 12th, I was 27 shows away from 12,000 shows. So I don't know if we'll ever reach that figure again. Ironically enough, there was a little production yesterday of 2 one-act plays that they allowed 10 people to see in a small room. So now I'm 26 away from 12,000. But yes, I do go all the time and still enjoy it immeasurably.
Amazing. That must be something for the Guinness Book of Records.
I have no idea. I wouldn't think so, frankly, because certainly there have been people who have been at it longer than I. But nevertheless, I do feel that I do go all the time, and that's a good way to spend my time.
Well, now to the questions, our 7 questions. Well, my first particular question to you is, what did you have lined up in the diary when the lockdown took place on Broadway? I mean, what did you have lined up?
Well, the thing is that Broadway shows often open at the end of March and during the month of April because they want to get Tony nominations and Tony Awards, because that is a very good way of selling tickets. Because most people watch the Tony Awards statistics show not to see who wins or who loses, but to see the musical numbers and say, oh, that looks good, we should see that. Of course, if you're nominated, you get on the show much more easily if you're not nominated. They want you on the show if you're nominated. They may let you on if there's time and space if you're not nominated. So getting those nominations are very, very important. And because people have short memory spans, most of the shows open just days before the Tony nominations come out. So as a result, we missed a lot of shows that we would have seen, such as many that you've seen, in fact. Company, which of course was in London with now a female protagonist as Bobby, B-O-B-B-I. Was going to open here with Patti LuPone, as was in the West End. And so we were looking forward to seeing that. Ironically enough, it was going to be the 50th anniversary of Company. And by the way, I was at the very, very, very first performance ever of the show when it was trying out in Boston. I was living there then. So it would have been a 50th anniversary for me too. We would have seen a musical about Princess Diana. You haven't seen that yet, but of course, that's of more than moderate interest to people in your neck of the woods. So that was going to happen as well. So we were looking forward to that. We were looking forward to a revival of How I Learned to Drive, a play about, well, a pedophile, but one who sincerely does love the young girl that he's pursuing. It's a sad case because he's not a bad man. It's just that something bad has happened to him. He's very sincere, but this was a Pulitzer Prize winning play of some years ago.
Oh, right.
So so we were looking forward to that. Mrs. Doubtfire I was looking forward to because it was going to star Rob McClure in the role made famous by Robin Williams in the
Yeah.
movie of some years ago. And the reason for that is because way back when he was a student at Montclair State University in New Jersey, where I was reviewing, as you pointed out, I saw him early on. And I thought he was terrific. And, the people you give the first clips to and you say they're terrific when nobody else knows it are always very grateful. So we've been friendly ever since. And so I was looking forward. And the advance word from out of town was that he was tremendous and he was going to win the Tony Award. And it's so sad that he was denied that. So Six was going to open. That's again a London hit, as you well know, about the six wives of Henry VIII, who point out the fact that if he hadn't had six wives, we might not remember any of them. It's the fact that in union there is strength, and the fact that so many of them made them stick around in history. And another British play, the Lehman trilogy, certainly about big business, was going to open here as well, but it didn't happen. Now, the Minutes, a play by Tracy Letts, who rose to fame and fortune with August County, Osage County, sorry, was going to happen as well. Now, ironically enough, on a few weeks ago on the street, I happened to run into the producer, Jeffrey Richards. He recognized me, even though I was wearing a mask. I must say I didn't recognize him. He was wearing a mask, as we all do here in New York City. And he swore to me this show is going to continue. It's going to go on once things get back to normal. And in fact, a lot of shows have announced that they're going to open next year on the anniversary of when they were going to open, such as Plaza
Okay.
Suite, a revival of a Neil Simon play from 1968. Well, three
Yeah.
little one-act plays, actually. And Matthew Broderick and Sarah Jessica Parker were going to be a married couple in real life, were going to be doing that play, in which two of the three plays, they are married. One, they certainly aren't. But anyway, that was something a lot of people were looking forward to because of the star power behind it. But everything comes to those who wait, and we hope that the postponement won't be any longer than March. According to the league, everything's going to come back in January, but of course, they were hoping for April 13th, and then the end of May, and then July, and so
Yeah.
nobody knows anything.
There's one that I know that I'm pretty sure you were going to write about that I particularly would absolutely love to see. And it was the City Encore's production of Love Life that was just about to open.
Well, ironically enough, yes, I was to write a review for the Kurt Weill newsletter. This was a musical from 1948 that
Yeah.
didn't get a cast album, and the reason
No.
was there was a musician strike at that time,
Yeah.
and it's really too bad because if indeed there hadn't been the strike, we would have an album of this one collaboration between Kurt Weill and Alan J. Lerner, who would later go on to write My Fair Lady and Camelot. So it's a very obscure show. A few recordings of some of the songs have surfaced here and there, and that's the best we
BBC did.
know.
The BBC did some recordings, didn't they? They filmed some excerpts. I don't know what it was for, but I think there were BBC recordings that I've seen of it.
Yes, I know the BBC does a lot of recordings of
Yeah.
shows. I know they've even done things as obscure as The Girl Who Came to Supper. But I must say that the BBC recording of Love Life has not wended its way into this apartment. I hope that that's rectified sooner rather than later. But anyway, so Love Life is about a marriage as well, and it goes through history. It starts in the Revolutionary War times and went right up to 1948. And it talked about the difficulties in being married and the difficulties of not being married, and that's what it was all about. And certainly, Alan J. Lerner might know something about that, since, well, granted, he was only married 2 or 3 times by that point, but he was married 8 times in total. This, by the way, from the man who wrote the song "How to Handle a Woman."
Huh?
I'm not sure he did know,
No.
considering that he was married 8 times, but that's another story entirely. But yes, we were all looking forward to Love Life, and we hope it's rescheduled. No mention has been made of whether that's happening or not. Dick
Oh,
Scanlon, who wrote Thoroughly Maudlin Millie,
yeah.
is a neighbor. and I run into him to the streets. The only people you see in New York streets now are people walking their dogs, and
Mhm.
that's indeed how I see Dick every day. And he says he's sure that Thoroughly Modern Millie will get done because when this all ends, we're going to need happy-go-lucky shows to get
Yes.
us in a good mood, and I do believe that's true. So we may see some happier shows rather than dark ones as time
Yeah.
goes on.
I mean, I like the idea of the Music Man because I love Kurt Weill and I love the funny concept of the whole way it's constructed because it's like a 200-year marriage, isn't it? They're like
Yes,
one couple,
yes,
and
right.
that's what I find appealing, and also the beautiful singing, the beautiful music. Because I always thought, oh, Brian Stokes Mitchell would be fantastic for that, and that's who was cast to sing in it, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah, Brian Stokes Mitchell, who
Yeah,
certainly has done wonderful performances over the years. I have a nice story about him, which I'd like to tell if it's all the same to you. In 1980 something, he won a Theatre World Award. Now, that's the organization that I now head, but I wasn't with it then. A man named John Willis was, and he saw Mitchell, as his name was then, in a musical called Male that lasted 17 performances. But he thought Brian was terrific and he gave him a Theatre World Award. And Brian has been forever grateful about that because, when you're in a flop, a lot of people don't notice you. But
yeah,
indeed, John did and gave him an award. So he's been very loyal to us. And when we do the ceremony, he occasionally comes and presents to the new winner. Well, anyway, one year he called me up and he said, listen, I can't do it. I've been on vocal rest. My doctor doesn't want me to speak at all. I shouldn't even be speaking to you now. But I can't do it today. And by the way, I knew this might happen because I lived near the theater where he was performing, and I saw the sign outside of the theater saying, at this performance, the role usually played by Brian Stokes Mitchell will be played by. So as a result, I said, no, no, please, you can't do this. You know how much John Willis loved you. He noticed you when you were nothing. You must come. And I swear, if you come, I'll never ask you to do this again. And he came and he presented. And I
wow,
have asked him again, and he's come again.
yes.
So that's Brian Stokes Mitchell for you.
Oh, it's good to hear the lovely stories.
You bet.
Yeah, and talking of shows that we hope will be resurrected, some that hadn't even got anywhere near opening, something like The Music Man. Now I don't know whether that was due to open this summer or where actually it was next summer that it's due to open, because I know that they're thinking of opening it next May, aren't they?
Well, yes, it was start previews. It should have been in previews now, all things being
Okay.
equal. And it would have opened, I think September 20th was the actual date that they were going to open. But of course, that's not going to happen. What's really surprising is that they're opening in late May because, as I mentioned, most shows open in April for the
Yeah.
Tony Awards. Now, they might note something about the Tony Awards that I don't, because as of right now, there's been no announcement of what's happening with the Tonys. They would have happened on June 7th, but that's come and gone. And we haven't heard anything about nominations. We haven't heard anything about award dates or anything like that. So I don't know if they're going to combine 2 years in one and maybe even do it later than May. And that's why the Music Man is choosing to open. For those who don't know what we're talking about, the Music Man is going to star Hugh Jackman,
Yeah.
who really jump-started his musical theater career in London with a production of Oklahoma, in which he was
Oklahoma.
sensational, and that production came to America without him and didn't run nearly as long or get reviews nearly as enthusiastic. And Sutton Foster, who is one of the success stories that you always see in movies, the understudy who gets the chance to go on, and that's what happened with Thoroughly Modern Millie. The leading lady got sick, and they put Sutton Foster in, and she gave a performance that day that made them say, "You're our girl." So as a result, so here we were going to have Hugh Jackman as Harold Hill and Sutton Foster as Marion the Librarian out in Mason City, Iowa, but no, not yet. And we have to hope, after all, Hugh Jackman's a busy man. Sutton Foster is a busy lady, but Hugh Jackman really is a superstar, while Sutton Foster is only a superstar. So as a result, we have to hope that nothing's going to get in the way, and we will see that, because The Music Man really is a marvelous show. And more to the point, in 1958, when the awards were given out for the 58, it opened in 58, but actually the awards were given out in 59. But my point is, it beat out West Side Story
I was going
for
to say that.
for musical of the year.
Yeah.
So that tells you a lot about the affection that people have for the Music Man here in America.
Yeah. I mean,
In
and
fact,
yeah,
in 2001, after 9/11, the Music Man was running here after the September 11th terrorist attacks. That was a Tuesday. There were no performances Tuesday. There were no performances Wednesday. And on Thursday, performances resumed. And I went to the Music Man because it's an all American show. And I was wondering, how are these actors going to react when they sing You Got Trouble right here in River City? I mean, this is incredible. And they gave such a performance for about 200 people. The place was empty. People were petrified of coming into New York that something else was going to happen. And it was very interesting. I had two friends on the show, and I waited for them at the stage door. And as the actors were coming out the stage door, they were all in tears. That's when they broke down. They really wanted to give everybody a show when they possibly could.
yeah.
But after it was over, that's when they let out all the emotions. And it was really something to see.
And really staggering that the show actually went on, quite frankly, because New York at that point, people, even in the UK, we were polarized with fear
I'll
from
bet.
what had
I'll bet.
happened.
Yeah.
Everybody, it was something. It was it was when the unthinkable and the unimaginable happens. It just everybody is at a standstill, aren't they? And the images that were coming from New York at that point. Um, were hard. It was all hard to imagine, and to think that a Broadway show would go on at a time like that, and that you don't imagine that performers have to be courageous.
You bet.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And that is a perfect example of it, isn't it?
Yes, it certainly is. And we had no idea that we were going to eventually be in a situation where it would be more than 2 days that
Yeah,
we would have no live theater. But Lord knows we're months into it.
yeah.
And well, that's it, and I guess we'll appreciate it more when it comes back. And it will be interesting to see how it comes back, how it can come back. Yeah, I wish I could have more confidence that our government would help out, but we do have a government let's say an administration at the moment that isn't terribly arts conscious, and we have something called the National Endowment for the Arts. You mentioned that I was on the panel there one year, and back in 1980, the budget was 160 million. And this year, 40 years later, the budget is 160 million. Now, inflation, according to my calculations, well, not my calculations, my research for calculations, says that inflation has gone up 211%, which means that the budget should be 497 million,
Yeah.
but it isn't. So I don't think we can depend much on the government, unlike you lucky people who have subsidized theater, the National Theater, et cetera. You're very lucky to have that because our situation here in America is either a small not-for-profit organization or a commercial theater Broadway where producers raise millions to put on musicals. So
It,
uh,
I
go
was going to
ahead.
say, it's interesting to hear you say that, because I've been really looking forward to talking to you about this, because in the UK, one of the biggest things that we have within the theatre have all been talking about since lockdown was every part of the economy seemed to have been supported in some way, except for freelancers and particularly people who work in the theatre. There was very little support for them, especially the people who are in the sort of the satellite part of the industry, people who work front of house, people who are freelancers, people who are, well, actors, musicians. There seemed to be very little support. And the support that we have, the National Theatre has even been, and the Royal Albert Hall have also been saying, if you don't help us soon, even with their subsidies, National Theatre, as you say, is subsidised, they've been crying out for a couple of months saying, we can't survive for an uncertain amount of time and keep this theatre running.
Shakespeare's Globe too, right? Shakespeare's Globe.
Oh gosh, and my drama teacher when I was studying was Diana Devlin, and I remember she went to work on that project when many years ago. So Diana,
Sure.
and it's such an amazing project to have been a part of, and I'm even proud to have had that small connection with it. And when I go there, I just think, isn't this beautiful? And that you're it's part of history on
Hmm.
lots of levels, and Sam Wanamaker's vision, the whole thing. But I mean, the pretty much 2 weeks ago now, or 10 days ago, we have an announcement from the government saying that they were going to give the industry, or donate to the industry, or provide a £1.5 billion worth of support to the theatre, to to culture in the country. But that comes 3.5 months after the lockdown. And when you look at other countries because we're so much part of it, Europe, for instance, France, right at the beginning of the lockdown, announced 7 billion euros worth of support to anyone involved in the arts in France on lockdown, and guaranteed salaries to be paid for anyone working in the arts, to be paid up until 2021. Now, how extraordinarily wonderful. And Germany, I think it was 120 million or a billion. There were substantial lumps of money were put by to something that generates a massive amount of income, generates huge income for the country, and is appreciated. And I'm interested to hear from you, because I would have thought that Broadway is a satellite of theatre and greatness. It shines out, and it always has done for me. Broadway, it's the centre. And you'd think that in the same way as we've been going, where's our help? So there's been, the Theatre League have been, I loved listening to hearing the plans that the Theatre League have for opening Broadway up in its managed stages. And I thought, someone's thinking sensibly, but you've had no help from the government.
Well, perhaps this is because way back in 1970, 50 years ago, Donald Trump was actually a co-producer of a Broadway play, which didn't last long at all. It was called Paris is Out, and it was about a married couple, an old Jewish married couple. She wants to go to Paris, he doesn't. And it was not a success. And for that matter, Betsy DeVos, who's now Secretary of Education, Donald Trump appointed her, also produced a Broadway musical called Scandalous about Amy Semple McPherson. Does that name mean anything to you? Do you know who she was? It's
No,
fine if you don't. Do not expect
no.
it to, really. She was a big evangelist who had a lot of people come to her church. And she lived a very unsavory life that nobody knew about while she was preaching about God and goodness and don't sin and all that goes with that. So there was a musical some years ago called Scandalous, and that didn't last long either. So who knows? Maybe they were soured from their theatrical experience and saying, Broadway was bad to me, I'll be bad to Broadway. Who knows? But whatever the case may be, we can't just pin it on this administration because, of course, there have been plenty of opportunities for any administration to step up to the plate. To be fair, I have a feeling things would have been much different. I've always felt this. In fact, I wrote a book about the 1963-64 Broadway season, and that was the same season in which John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And he and his wife Jacqueline were very pro-theater. They always went. They saw How to Succeed in Business. They saw Mr. President. They were big theater goers, and that was well known. And they really, and of course, you've undoubtedly heard that Camelot, that he was a big fan of Camelot, and that's why the administration has even been referred to as Camelot, because of a Broadway musical.
Yes.
So I do believe that if he had been able to serve out not just one term, but two, there would have been much more significant contribution to the arts. Don't forget, the building in Washington is called the Kennedy Center. So and that has 3 theaters in it. So as a result, it's really too bad that, for more reasons than one, needless to say, that John F. Kennedy was assassinated. But yeah, I think that really was something that would have made history go in a different direction with the support of the arts. But who knows?
So what is happening now? What's happened? Are people just surviving? Is there any help or benefits for people who work in the theatre in America right now?
Not that I've heard of, and it's very sad because I know one actor who he was in Phantom of the Opera,
Yeah.
which long-running show, great job security, who bought a house because figuring, well, we can afford the payments, and now suddenly that's gone. Similarly speaking, a person I know who was in Hamilton, which certainly was doing tremendous business even after all these years, he and his wife said, we can afford to have a baby now. Well, babies are expensive. They do say it costs $250,000 to raise a kid till 18. So, it's very sad for these people who certainly made plans based on the fact that they really thought they had job security, and they don't. But you're right. The word freelancer, there's an implication with the word freelancer that you're just not good enough to have a regular job. That stigma goes with the word freelancer. And so as a result, it's too bad that these people have to be hit harder than
Yeah.
so many others.
Yeah. Well, let's just hope that it will. I mean, we're looking right now, we're all thinking it's going to, by hook or by crook, with a vaccine, that theatre will start to get moving again at the beginning of next year, aren't we?
And perhaps a good play to start, even though it has an enormous cast, and money will be at a premium, would be Thornton Wilder's The Skin of Our Teeth. I don't know if you know the play. Your laugh tells me you do. But for those who don't, this is a play that tells that human beings always do get through by the skin of their teeth.
Yeah.
Um, it starts off in the Ice Age, and it looks like we're going to die. We don't. Noah's flood, we survive. Wars, we survive. So, good one to start.
Yeah.
I need a drink. Go ahead, tell me.
Right. We'll move on to jollier subject of the
Hmm.
meetup questions. And my next question to you is, and this is quite a big question for someone like you, is what's your favourite show of all time? And I'm thinking of musicals, so you've got to stick to musicals.
Fine. That's a very easy one for me to answer because, in a way, it will always be My Fair Lady because it was the first one I ever saw. In fact, I grew up in a very working class home where theater was never mentioned. I didn't even know they did it anymore. I mean, when automobiles came in, they stopped using horses. When electricity came in, they stopped using candles. I assume when movies came in, they stopped doing plays. So as a result, when I went to My Fair Lady, I thought I was going to see a movie. So really, right up till showtime. I mean, when the house lights dimmed, I thought there was a power failure. We were going to get our money back. So as a result, that experience, and the show was running close to 6 years at that point, and I'm sure it was in terrible, tired shape. But to me, it was the greatest thing I've ever seen. And I was, when people talk about if you go back in history and see anything, what would you see? I'd love to see that very performance again because I'm sure I'd see a million flaws in it. But that day, I was just filled with frisson, like you feel like your body is full of ginger ale up to your shoulders. So, in a way, it will always be that. I shouldn't mention this, I guess, to an English person, but 1776, about how we broke away from your august country and formed our own, is certainly one of my favorites too, because what's so wonderful about it is that it treats the opposition fairly. In other words, the people who are pro-England are not fat and stupid and lisping and effeminate. They come up with very good reasons why indeed we should not break from England. Look at the history. Look, we have no army, we have no friends, we have no money. How can we win? And you say, gee, they're right. So it's a very clever show on that level. And I have to say, I'm always loyal to the shows when I see them early, even if they become Titanic hits. And a lot of people don't do that. They turn against the Titanic hits because everybody loves them.
Yeah.
So don't expect me to say anything bad about The Sound of Music or Annie. They're terrific shows. May they live and be well. Certainly, they still are living and being well in many permutations. Nobody's doing them live now, but I bet right now, as we're speaking, somebody's watching one of the Annie movies or one of the Sound of Music movies.
Well, Annie was on in the West End a couple of years ago. So,
Oh, I remember when it was
yeah.
there. Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
one of the things that I particularly like about Annie is the background to Annie, about who wrote it.
Well, I was just writing about that in a different context because Martin Chernin, who's the guy who had the idea for it and wound up writing the lyrics and directing it, had a father who was so anti-musicals. Now, the
Was he?
father, William Chernin, was with the Metropolitan Opera. He wasn't a star, but he was a working opera singer. And he was very friendly with Ezio Pinza, who took the job as Emile de Beck in South Pacific. Well, when William Charnon heard this, he was furious with his friend. How could you deign to do something as disgustingly banal as a Broadway musical? And it really ended the friendship. Martin Charnon always talked about the fact of Enzio Pinza banging on their door saying, William, let me in, let me in. The father says, you're dead to me. Well, here's what's even more interesting. So a musical in 1957 is starting and they need teenagers. And Martin Charnon thinks that he could act in it. So he goes down and he gets the job. He's going to be a jet in West Side Story. But he can't tell his father. His father would disown him. So every night, he says, I think I'll go out. And the father has no idea
Oh,
where he's
how
going. He's hanging out in
funny.
the corner. He's going to work. And that's where he's going. So really, Barton Charnon was theater right to the very core.
Well, I'm
And
never.
Yeah, and what's really something about Annie is you go in there thinking it's going to be this crazy spoof and you're going to see a girl with no eyeballs, and you get pulled into that story. You care about that girl, you care about Daddy Warbucks, you want them to be father and daughter, and the obstacles that come in their way. I mean, you really get emotionally involved, and I will never forget that. I saw it way back when it was just starting out at the Goodspeed Opera House in East Haddam, Connecticut, when a lot of people thought it was going to amount to nothing at all, and it certainly proved them wrong.
This is what I find, but you see, it's the stories as well behind these shows, isn't it? That's so extraordinary. I didn't know that story about Martin Charnin's father. What I did love was the fact that Martin Charnin was in West Side Story, and
Mm-hmm.
I love the story behind everybody that was involved in West Side Story. And one of the you very kindly introduced me to Harvey Evans when we met up
Ah,
before,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
the wonderful Harvey Evans was another one of the Jets, and he was talking. He talked to me about the way everybody thinks West Side Story is such has always been a big fantastic hit, that it was a hit when it was on Broadway, and he said to me, yeah, we all wanted to be in it because it was so exciting, but he said up to, and I'd read that people would walk out of West Side Story when it opened at the Winter Garden, and I
Sure,
didn't really
sure.
believe it because people always say, well, you shouldn't always believe what you read, but he said to me up to 200 people a night would walk out because they were so shocked at
Mm.
the storyline. You know, there was fights, there was bad language, well, bad language in inverted commas, but and it's something that we think is so exciting, and it didn't really become a hit till the film was made, did it?
Well, and I'm of that generation. I am the quintessential baby boomer. I was literally born 9 months after World War II ended. So as a result, there I am. It's 1961. I'll fess up. I'm 15 years old. And so are my classmates and so many others. And for years, that soundtrack album of West Side Story was number one for like 5 years on the charts because the baby boomers went. You know, the thing is, as my friend Bert Silverberg, who directs in Rhode Island, says, you say you're directing a show and you try to get boys and boys are not interested. You tell them you're doing West Side Story and suddenly they want to be Jets and Sharks. So even though a lot of girls drag their boyfriends on dates during that time when West Side Story was in the theaters, the fact remains that the boys were able to like it too because it was a tough
It's
musical.
tough. Yeah.
So really, the baby boomers are responsible for West Side Story's success. Not that the stage show was a failure. It lasted 732 performances,
Yes,
which
that's
is
true.
a fine run in those days.
Yeah.
Gypsy only ran 702. So, you know, under those circumstances, we can't really say that it wasn't it wasn't a mammoth hit. And you're right, indeed. I mean, we hear the stories of people walking out because the first act ends without the curtain coming down with two dead bodies right on stage, and that doesn't make you sing. That's entertainment, I
No.
mean. So it was a tough time. So but West Side Story helped more serious musicals to proliferate, and so we're in its stead for that. It'd be
Yeah.
much harder to watch Sweetie Todd if we had not had a West Side Story.
Oh, I was horrified when I saw Sweeney Todd.
Sure,
I
sure.
saw it at the National. um I absolutely love it now because but it was so, oh, um
Well, there's no question that time and repeated hearings, as Frank Rich once said, always tell with a Sondheim score. So it's he's complicated, and we all have to catch up to him.
absolutely. He's doesn't he say that it usually takes about 20 years?
Yeah, that probably is about right.
Now, your next question on the meetup is who is your favorite performing artist of all time? But this is today and yesterday.
Okay, well, in terms of performing artists, I have to say that Donna Murphy today is someone who doesn't work very much, and that's by her own choice. She's raising a kid or two. I don't know if it's one or two, frankly, but she wants to be a good home mother. And as a result, when Bette Midler said she didn't want to do 8 performances a week of Dolly, I'll do 7, she said. Donna Murphy was enlisted to do that other performance, and she was quite wonderful. I first discovered her in 1987 when she was in a bit part in a musical called Birds of Paradise, but I named her the Best Supporting Actress in a musical that year. I thought she was the sun and the moon, and she has never disappointed me in any of the shows she's been in. um, be it even the Encore's revival of Follies, where she was perfectly cast as Phyllis. So she's quite a lady. And when she did Wonderful Town, she was quite amazing as well. There's a scene in Wonderful Town where she has to take on different voices, and you almost felt like you were watching Sybil, the person with the different personality. She was so convincing in it. And she was also, of course, magnificent in The King and I, for which she won a Tony Award. And not least of all, Passion, the Sondheim show, where she really established herself. I remember so vividly at the Tony press room. Sondheim came in because he had already gotten his awards for Best Music and Lyrics, so he was hanging around with the journalists. And when Donna Murphy won a little later, he was the one to say, "What a surprise!" Meaning, of course, it was no surprise at all because she was really quite brilliant. In terms of yesteryear, Robert Preston, I think you always knew you were going to get a good performance out of him. And I still remember very fondly a musical called Ben Franklin in Paris, 1964, and he was Ben Franklin, shaved his head to look like Ben Franklin, long flowing hair, what was left of it, all that kind of stuff. And he was truly magnificent in that. Wonderful in I Do, I Do. Even in a musical that closed out of town, I was lucky enough to see a gypsy run through, which means they do a performance just for people in the industry before they go out of town. No sets, no costumes, just everybody in place where he's supposed to be. And Robert Preston played this great star of the Yiddish theater. We had the Yiddish theater on Second Avenue for the immigrants way back at the turn of the century, the last century. And so he had a wonderful, wonderful role as this starring great legend of the Yiddish theater. Now, granted, he may not have seemed as Yiddish as you wanted him to be, but the dynamic performance was what was there. And I was very lucky to catch it. Since it's a show that didn't even come to New York, it closed in Boston because it did have problems, but the problem had nothing to do with Robert Preston. So those are, in terms of my favorite writers, the aforementioned Sondheim, but also somebody whose play we're not going to see. They already announced that when things do get back to normal, even though the signs are still up at the theater, Hangman, Martin McDonough. He's the playwright I always look forward to more than any other. I remember reading his play, The Cripple of Inishmin, while on a train going to New Jersey, and people were thinking I was absolutely bonkers because I was laughing so hard. What's he laughing so hard for? That type of thing. And, they were annoyed. I was annoying people. Well, anyway, a year later, I decided to read the play again while I was on the train. I figured, I've read it. I'm not going to laugh now. So I'll be same thing all over again, laughing like crazy, people scowling at me for disturbing them and all that. So those, I have to say that I do believe, after all, Sondheim is 90, and there has been some noise about his working on a show, but that show has been at least 3 years in the making, and I bet I'm low. And we'll consider Sondheim my favorite writer of yesteryear and Martin McDonough of this year.
Okay, fantastic reply. Thank you very much. Now, here's an interesting one for you. Broadway or West End?
This would have been more interesting if we were talking about the 60s and 70s, because, of course, there were so many British musicals over there that never came over here. Blitz, a musical about World War II. Maggie May, a rewrite of the Mary Magdalene story. Twang, about Robin Hood. Passion Flower Hotel, about precocious teenage girls. A lot of wonderful British musicals that I treasure from their cast albums. But my point is, they didn't come to America, and a lot of American shows didn't go to London. Of course, the big hits did. Of course, they did. Just as Oliver came over to our shores as well. And so did Pickwick, for that matter. Not for long, but it was here. But anyway, the point is, I'm afraid there's not much difference now between the West End and Broadway. When I go to the West End, I see the same attractions that I can see here. And while it's fun to see a British take on things, and the fact remains is so many of the shows are replicated in each city. I will say that the girl I saw play Matilda, um, who had a very long Greek name, was tremendous and much better than the girls I saw here in New York. And the reason was she's the real thing. She's a young British girl. While here, I
Yeah.
think they made a mistake by keeping it British because all these American kids had to learn British accents. And you talk about people walking out of West Side Story. People walked out of Matilda at intermission saying, I can't understand a word they're saying, because the poor kids were saddled with these accents. If they Americanized it, I think that show would still be running today.
Do you
So
think,
it's
Chris, what do you think about the thing about voice coaches? This is an extra question. Voice coaches, both sides of the Atlantic. for instance, I saw My Fair Lady at Lincoln Centre
Uh-huh.
years ago.
Right.
I
And
heard such a yeah, and I went because I know I'm friends and have worked with Dominic McHugh, who I think you know,
oh,
who
I
worked
love
on the
Dominic.
show,
Yeah,
and
sure,
so I'll
sure,
just do my
sure,
name
sure,
dropping here. And I
sure.
really wanted to see it, and I wanted to hear it for the music. But the accents, I was really surprised because I thought if anywhere in the world people work on their accents and people really, really work hard to get the accent right, it will be on Broadway. But I heard such a mishmash from Scottish, Irish, and not really Cockney that came through. And I just sat there thinking, oh, and and of course there's that fine nuance, isn't there, that when the British think they're doing a great American accent, and we're just as bad.
Well, I have to say that I think the British are far better at doing American than Americans are doing British. And I had a big argument with Elaine Page about this, who believed just the opposite. But I am flabbergasted when I go over to England and see American shows, and the accents are flawless as far as I'm concerned. While indeed I can tell that people here in America, American actors are struggling to do the English ones. So I think you're way ahead of us on that issue, way ahead.
But it's funny because it used to be the other way round, didn't it? We didn't used to pay so much attention to accent 30 years ago, and now that's
I am told that. I will admit I didn't get to London until 1984. So yeah, I'm really not as good authority as I might be on that. But nevertheless, maybe that's what Elaine Page was talking about when we argued. We got over it. We're friends. You know,
yeah,
it's okay. You know.
that's all right then. So have you answered my question? Is it Broadway or is it West End?
I think they're much the same. So,
You've got an even Steven.
I think it's a tie. I wish it weren't. I wish it weren't. I wish that there were completely different attractions going on over there. Now, of course, I do see a lot of things in your not-for-profit theater, your institutional theaters, the National Theater, the Old Vic, the Donmar Warehouse, places like that. I can certainly see different things. So, if West End also includes those,
Yes.
then I will say I am more interested in England. Every year, my girlfriend gives me as a birthday gift a trip to England, and frankly, I've missed that more this year than I did actually the Broadway. We were supposed to go in June,
Yeah.
and so I've missed that more. And of course, you know, being in an exotic place, which is what it is to me. I mean, I know my way around and all that, but still, it's just such fun to be there. And you know, so I guess under the circumstances, if we're going to include the not-for-profit sector, then indeed I am certainly in favor of the West End. And the last time I was there, in a commercial playhouse in the West End, I did see Ibsen's Rosmersholm, and you don't get that on Broadway very often. So I was grateful for that opportunity.
That's one of the things that struck me when I was last in New York, is that there don't seem, if you look for lots of plays, you've got to go off Broadway, haven't you? If you want to see,
Mm-hmm.
there's
Mm-hmm.
lots of musicals, there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
the big, you know, the great
Sure.
big wonderful shows. But I saw a terrific production of Sweeney Todd, the Tooting Beck performance, you know, the one, the pie shop performance
Sure.
that
Sure.
they put on at Barrow Street Theatre
Yeah. Right.
with
Very
Sally Ann
imaginative.
Triplet. And it was just the same as I'd seen it on Shaftesbury Avenue. I didn't see it in Tooting, which I wish I had seen. And I was
Aha.
so fascinated to see it again. And they did it beautifully. It was
They sure
absolutely
did.
wonderful. And I tell you what, their accents were absolutely spot on. I know we had Sally Ann
Uh-huh.
Triplet in that, but because I that same week I saw My Fair Lady at Lincoln Centre, and then
Ah.
Sweeney Todd saved it for me, because I just thought now they've got that sussed. So whoever they were working with on that production, I was so impressed and so delighted that
Good.
I'd gone there.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So you see, so it's evens, isn't it?
Yes, it does.
Right, we've come, I can't believe it, to our last question. And I'm asking a man who's written so much in his life, and you've written, I don't know how many books you've written, but have you written a book about your life? And if you were to write a book about your life, what would the title be? And what would your favourite chapter be?
Well, it's very hard to get any theater book published these days. And but if I were to write a book about my theater going, it would either be called 100 Million Musicals,
Yes.
which is a play on a song from Rodgers and Hammerstein Flower Drum song, 100 Million Miracles, or Around the World in 80 Plays, where I
Nice.
would talk about my various, I've seen theater in a lot of places. I've seen it in virtually every state of this country. And in 14 other countries. So I've seen The View from the Bridge in Israel. I've seen Run for Your Wife in Italy. I've seen Man of La Mancha in Paris. So as a result, it would be great fun to write about all those things. So, but if I would write an autobiography simply of my life, not just exclusive of theater going, but my whole life, I would love the title to be Yes! Exclamation point, which is my favorite song from any Broadway show. It's from a show called 70 Girls 70. It only lasted a month. It's by Kander and Ebro Cabaret in Chicago. But it's about seizing opportunities. Say yes to things. See what happens if you say yes. And so that's what I want to inscribe to my tombstone with a big exclamation point.
Oh, isn't that lovely? Favorite chapter?
Oh, definitely moving to New York. I was a high school teacher, and to be perfectly frank, I was having a wonderful time of it. But anyway, my wife, who was my high school sweetheart, fell in love with a man from work, and they're still together. God love them. May they live to be 100. And and I just said, well, then I'm going to move to New York and try my fortune. I was living in suburban Boston then, and getting here. Yeah, I was so fortunate. In the first year, I met the woman that I'm still with. So, so that first year in New York would be my favorite chapter, as I was able to go from show to show to show to show, and fall in deep love too.
Wonderful. I can't wait for the book.
We'll see what happens.
Peter Filichia, thank you so much for meeting me on the meetup today. What a wonderful opportunity to see you again after 6 years.
Yep, you've held up well.
Thank you, as have you. But thank you for your time today. It's just terrific to be able to talk and at such a distance and still to be able to keep the theatre connection alive and together.
You bet. All right.
I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you, Peter.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Just talking musicals with you.